light the tower. The University of Texas, national champs in men's swimming and diving, winning the gold last night, really capping off a weekend so far that's been pretty strong for Texas athletics. Bob Bowman and his team winning the university's 16th national championship in men's swimming and diving. Just a terrific start to his career, taking over for the venerable Eddie Reese just this year and winning a national championship in his first deal. Great job there by those guys. They sang Eyes of Texas and Texas Fight in the pool after winning last night. Other news and notes, CJ, that I think are important that we want to talk about here. Other good things that happened. Obviously, the women's basketball team moves on to the Elite Eight after dispensing with Tennessee. Tennessee made it a real game for the first three quarters, but the play of two freshmen really helped separate the Longhorns in the fourth quarter. Brianna Preston, a point guard out of Atlanta, and then Jordan Lee, kind of a wing from California. Both had really strong fourth quarters to kind of move Texas on to victory. Longhorns now take on TCU in the Elite Eight tomorrow night around 6 o'clock. Make sure everybody's tuning in for that. That matchup will be in Birmingham and on national television as well. Other news and notes, CJ, I'm going to let you talk about this because the men's baseball team is just on a flat roll. They won 3 straight in Columbia, Missouri this weekend, finishing up that series yesterday afternoon.
Yeah, big series win for the Longhorns. Good sweep right there. And again, Missouri's not a great team, right? But you go on the road in the SEC and you come away with 3 victories. That's a great sign for this team, especially when dealing with a few injuries, right? Adrian Rodriguez, Max Balloon not in the lineup for that Saturday doubleheader. Yet Will Gasparino was the name. He was the bat, really, that stood up for the Texas Longhorns on the road. 3-game sweep. Gasparino at one point had 11 at-bats and had 5 homers in that span. That's pretty good, you know.
Again, was I the one pitching to him or what?
He sure made it look like that was the case, Bobby. But for the Longhorns now, 8-1 in SEC play, going on the road, taking that 3-game series. Look, you stack wins when you can, especially in this conference. Texas, again, great start to the season, 8-1. And it looks like Ruger Riojas found himself a nice little home as a Sunday starter. That's a great sign for this team moving forward. Yeah, they needed one more guy to step up in the pitching rotation. Completely agree. And even though you called him a Sunday starter, he started on Saturday yesterday. Right. But, they were trying to get out of town pretty early. I want to say this. We're going to talk about football recruiting and football practice here in a second. One last comment. Mike White's team, the softball team, are in Starkville, Mississippi this weekend. They split a Friday doubleheader. Did not play yesterday because they were worried about rain. They play today at 1 o'clock. We'll let y'all know on the live stream later tonight how that turned out. But all in all, just a very good weekend of sports so far for if you're a Texas Longhorn fan. Always precious when you win a national title. So congrats again to those guys in the men's swimming and diving program. All right, hey, let's talk a little bit about recruiting. Texas picked up a commitment yesterday. Nick Robertson, big offensive lineman out of Klein High in the Houston area, 6'3", 330-ish, maybe 6'4", depending on what you look at or what site you look at. Just a dominating player, CJ. And I think this is really the size guy. When they talk about big humans on the interior of the offensive line, this is what Steve Sarkisian and Kyle Flood are really talking about. Guys that can move people off the line of scrimmage. Yeah, absolutely. And again, we kind of got to peel back a little bit with Nicholas Robertson yesterday. Of course, that decision, he said, had Kyle Flood jumping around in the coach's office, something I don't know many Texas fans can envision knowing Kyle Flood a little bit. But, hey, a big commitment for Texas for 2 reasons, right? You had Max Wright in the fold. He kind of projects more towards tackle, kind of a longer developing physically picture for him. But then you look at Nicholas Robertson. You said 6'3.5", 335, Bobby. He carries that weight very well. And then you turn on the tape and you say, oh, he really can move people at this weight, and he does so very well as well. But at the guard spot specifically is where he projects more so. So you got 1 tackle, you got 1 guard in the picture, and of course Texas looking at a number of really talented national prospects on the offensive line as well. great start to this offensive line picture. But for Nick Robertson yesterday, Bobby, to kind of say, yeah, I'm glad I made the decision is something that I felt like was building up for a few months. I could have made this decision back in December, really, to make it public and make it official now. Great sign for Texas. And he also said, I love playing guard because whenever I pull, I just want to obliterate whoever's in my path. And again, 335, he does that very well.
Hey, I want to say this. I don't care where he's rated, and Jerry Hamilton made mention of this in his commitment video. This was a priority guy for Kyle Flood. So take away all the ratings and everything else. Kyle Flood wanted Nick Robertson from day one in this recruiting cycle. I think that speaks volumes in and of itself as well. But he was not the only recruit on campus. You and Jeff Howe talked a little bit about this yesterday. Some other guys that were on campus, 3 of them, CJ, that are reclassifications. I thought this was unique. Like 3 guys, like high five-star potential guys that were originally class of 2027 are moving forward to class of 26. Mark Bowman, a big tight end out of California, Xavier Crowell, a running back out of Alabama, and then Booby Feaster, the wide receiver out of DeSoto. All 3 of those guys were originally 27s. They came in this weekend along with a number of 2026 offers. Caden Prothrow, the tight end out of Bowdoin, Georgia, was also in. Then you had Max Wright, the commitment from Melissa, big offensive lineman. A lot of guys, all in all, visiting for a practice on Saturday with the Longhorns that we'll touch on a little bit. What was your overall takeaway from the weekend and what the Longhorns had in for unofficial visits here?
Yeah, I think that kind of stole the show, right? Those reclassified guys. And normally when you talk about reclassifications, the number one thing for me is how do you hold up physically? Do you look the part of a guy that just skipped an entire grade to get closer to playing in college football? And when you look at Mark Bowman, absolutely. You look at Xavier Crowell, absolutely. And of course, Booby Feaster with his speed and his length, they all check those boxes in terms of the physical traits. Now, for Mark Bowman specifically, Bobby, I mean, I don't know if you could build a better looking prospect at the tight end position out of high school. That's an impressive prospect. And when he left campus on Saturday, he was walked out by Jeff Banks. He left with Brandon Baker out of the facility. The 2 took a photo right outside of Moncrief, the 2 modern day prospects as well. Texas did a great job of making him feel at home despite being in Texas. And of course, he does have ties to the state of Texas. His father grew up in Louisville, lived there for quite a while. There is some connections to the state. So Texas, one of those big time constants right now in his commitment or in his recruitment, in terms of Ohio State, USC. Is Georgia still around? Georgia's going to be a big time player for Caden Prothrow as well out of Georgia. So right now, Texas in a really solid spot for Mark Bowman. And they certainly pulled out all the stops to make sure that he felt that while on his visit with his family on Saturday.
So Bowman, you think Georgia's maybe one of the primary competitors. Crowell, the running back, we think the primary competitor is Alabama, although he's visiting a bunch of schools, so other schools could crop up. What about Feaster? What's going on in that recruitment at this point?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. He, of course, was at Texas A&M on Friday, so the Aggies are certainly looking at filling up their wide receiving room right now. LSU was a team that was perceived to be a big-time play for him in his recruitment, but LSU just filled up on wide receivers with Tristan Keys. They added Jabari Mack. They got another one in the fold. Do they continue to push? I assume they will, but point being, Texas looks a little bit lighter in the wide receiving room at the moment with just Chris Stewart out of Shadow Creek committed in the 26 class. Texas starting to turn back and around on Booby Feaster at the moment. Texas A&M looks like that team right now that would be the stiffest competition.
Okay, fair enough. All right, that's going to do it for recruiting. We'll have more on the live stream. You'll be able to ask Jerry questions. Folks will be able to ask him questions. As well as others of us. Let's move on to practice updates because it was the 3rd practice overall for the Longhorns. They had a walkthrough on Friday after practicing Tuesday and Thursday of this week. And then Saturday, they got after it. These recruits were able to go watch them practice. Yeah. And that is where some of this information comes from, quite frankly. CJ, I'll let you start with what you heard about Arch Manning.
Yeah, good day for Arch Manning. He had command of the offense. He was very accurate is one thing that I heard several times throughout Saturday afternoon is that when balls needed to get two places, whether that be on outbreaking routes, whether that be on slants or digs, they got there. And that's something that I think Texas fans are going to be very familiar with in the RPO game with Arch next year. But the ball just has some zip to his hand. And I think that's, again, the expectation, having seen a couple, throws and highlights from Arch last year, you kind of got a glimpse of what he will be. But that was something that was noted to me, is just that ball leaves his hand, Bobby, with a little bit of oomph there. And
yeah, it's got some zing to it, I think is the fair way to put it. One of the recruits that you talked to that I heard the interview with yesterday, CJ, was just like, look, he just looks different, kind of. Yeah. He's a big guy. I mean, people don't realize, you hear the name and you don't realize necessarily how big Arch Manning is. He's a big guy and he's pretty agile for his size. Following up on that, the receiver room. We continue and talked about it early in this camp. I mean, Parker Livingstone may be one of the surprises of the camp, and apparently he had another good day on Saturday.
Yeah, this has kind of been a recurring theme so far. And again, only 3 practices in, but the returns about Parker Livingstone has been really solid, really positive in terms of what he could be for this team this fall. And look, he's found the end zone multiple times in multiple days so far in spring practice in the team setting, right? That's one-on-ones. That's your best on best towards the end of practice. Great sign, of course, to have that rapport early with Arch Manning, I think is also very much a positive. But for him to be able to stretch the field vertically, which I think is something that is a little bit underrated about his game, he's playing out of the slot. He's been a handful there. And again, he's finding ways to make plays in a room that, quite frankly, at the moment doesn't have many proven playmakers, Bobby. So a very much a positive sign. And I'm not ready to say he's going to be a guy that starts for this team. Look, again, 3 practices in, but I definitely am of the impression that he will be a big-time player for this team in the fall, somehow in that rotation, regardless of who they go add out of the portal, how many guys they add out of the portal, or what the status of DeAndre Moore and Ryan Wingo will be this fall as well.
You speak of Wingo. Moore is on the shelf right now, dealing with the toe, healing from a toe injury, surgery. What are you hearing? We saw Wingo in person on Tuesday. I mean, he just looks like $1 million.
Yeah.
What are you hearing behind the scenes on him at this point?
Yeah, look, you can see the ball, Bobby. It's a great sign for him, right? But hey, that sophomore jump that you were hoping, right, out of a freshman campaign that was very solid, he's taking those steps, and of course, off the field as well, making sure that he can see everything. That's a heck of a step as well. But for Ryan Wingo, just that physical athleticism, right? You look at him, 6'2.5", can move like the wind. A heck of a prospect, and I've heard that he's taking that leadership role inside that room along with DeAndre Moore, who's, again, not on the field this spring. That's the next step for Ryan Wingo, and so far he's taken it in the spring so far.
CJ, one of your articles, you also wrote that Dalen McCutcheon, of the true freshman, seems to be getting a lot of run. He's performing quite well early in camp. He was the lowest rated of the 4 incoming receivers. I was told that yesterday Michael Terry, the young man out of Alamo Heights that was recruited as an athlete but starts his career off as a receiver at Texas, put most of his work in at the slot on practice on Saturday. That's significant because if he can kind of carve out that role, that's semi-tight end, semi-slot, you start getting him closer to the line of scrimmage like that, he might be able to do a few more things, including be in the backfield potentially. But they're clearly giving him a role right now. If they're starting to make him work out strictly there, it gives you an idea maybe of where that might be headed long-term. Tight end, I heard Jordan Washington. This is a little new nugget. Jordan Washington was a little dinged up yesterday. Should be fine, maybe out of practice or 2, but just a little dinged up. We'll see what happens. CJ, you wanted to make a note. I've got this here about the offensive line. Before we do that, I want to say thank you to our friends over at Allegiant Digital Marketing. They are the sponsor of this episode of On Texas Football on Sundays. We appreciate them very much. Led by Chad Markham, the founder and CEO of Allegiant Digital Marketing. They have been helping Texans and Austinites with their business marketing for a number of years now. They just do a tremendous job of identifying your company's needs, finding new customers, consistent leads, and just marketing services to promote your business that actually work. Chad leads an Austin-based ad agency that has helped thousands of business owners just like you for more than 25 years conquer these challenges If you're ready to start making money in your business and grow with confidence, visit allegiantdigital.com/ontexasfootball and get a free marketing plan. Plus, you can save up to $2,500 in advertising. Just mention their Hook 'em Horns special today. Again, that's Chad Markham and the group over at Allegiant Digital. Just use the code allegiantdigital.com/ontexasfootball to learn more. CJ, I mentioned that offensive line. What did they have to say in particular about Trevor Goosby and DJ Campbell that you wanted to point out from the players that watched practice yesterday?
The first thing was that it looks like Trevor Goosby is going to be just fine stepping in and filling in for Kelvin Banks, right? You replace a first-round talent left tackle. It's not an easy thing to do, but so far, Trevor Goosby, at least physically and in practice, looks like he's going to be doing just fine. And Texas fans should know that, right? They watched him against some really highly talented opponents in that front seven against Texas A&M, Ohio State, Georgia, right? Got to see him pretty often in those games. Right now, it sounds like Trevor Goosby physically is the most impressive looking prospect on that offensive line, but also heard, hey, this is a big money year for DJ Campbell in terms of his NFL future as well. That was a name that stood out for a number of prospects on campus on Saturday. So, hey, 52, he looks good. And I think that's what Texas fans were hoping to hear for DJ Campbell, who came back for year 4.
We talked a little bit earlier this week, or last week now, I guess, that both DJ Campbell and Cole Hudson appear to be the leaders of the offensive line at this point. Goosby, obviously a first-year starter, while Hudson and Campbell are both returning starters from previous years. One more thing I want to mention on the defensive side. Haven't heard a ton there at this point, but one thing that's definitely happening is Trey Moore, the former edge prospect, originally committed to Texas out of UTSA. He is now working primarily at off-ball linebacker. We've talked about this, but I say primarily, it's almost exclusively is what we're hearing actually, right?
Yeah, it's kind of been surprising because, again, you see the back half of his season in 2024. So he figured it out, Bobby, off the edge. So, hey, if this is where the staff best views him to get guys off the edge with a Trey Moore on the field, I'm all for it. That's just another guy that can rush the passer, another guy that with mobility and space. Let's see what this staff can draw up with this pass rushing package that we expect to be pretty darn good next fall. But Trey Moore, again, moving back to the second level at linebacker, it's pretty interesting because you got a lot of bodies right now that are in that 6'3", 240, 245-pound mold. And I'm interested to see how they draw that up. But right now, Trey Moore getting a lot of work at linebacker, more so right now than at edge, which, again, that'll free up the path for Colton Vasek, a Zeno Umeozulu, who I've heard looking really good right now in spring practice. And, of course, Colin Simmons and Ethan Burke, who we figure to be some of those big-time players on the edge for this team next fall.
You go back. I think that's a good update for what happened with practice yesterday. I want to go back because I started thinking about it as you were talking about those reclassified juniors that are now seniors and visited Texas, whether it was Bowman, Feaster, Crowell. Think back to a guy that reclassified, Quinn Ewers.
Mm-hmm.
He probably wasn't physically ready to reclassify, even though he did, right. And made some NIL money out of it. Ended up coming back to Texas afterwards. That I think the physical development of those young guys, if they're not ready, can actually be a negative at some
hindrance.
level. And something just to think about. But anyways, look, good luck to the Lady Longhorns tomorrow night at 6:00 against TCU. We'll be watching that. Hopefully we're able to see practice early tomorrow morning with the Longhorns. Congrats also to the men's swimming and diving team for the national championship. Again, like the tower there. Then also congrats to the Texas men's baseball team sweeping the folks up in Columbia, Missouri, and the Tigers. All right, CJ, we'll have more later today. You have some direct line communication with some recruits that we're going to put up here on Texas Football. We also have the live stream. If you have any questions, want to talk to myself, Jerry, Rod, whoever tonight, please do so. For CJ Vogel and our producer, Matt Hutchinson, I'm Bobby Burton. Hope you guys have a good Sunday. Take care now. Welcome.